All right. Well, we're doing Sri Nisargadatta's I Am That, and his new questioner has some practice under his belt, and seems to have gotten to quite advanced in his practice, actually, from the things he was describing. And Maharaj's last question was about his realization or about his understanding. He says, was it sudden or was it gradual? And the questioner says, oh, it was quite sudden, like something quite forgotten coming back into one's mind, or like a sudden flash of understanding. How simple, I said. How simple. I'm not what I thought I am. I'm neither the perceived nor the perceiver. I am the perceiving only. And Maharaj says, not even the perceiving, but that which makes it all possible. So pointing at being pure potential, that you have that in that state, really we exist in a pure potential, the potential of a universe, the potential of manifesting, but quite silent, quite still, outside of time. And so I'm not sure things. Well, I haven't been outside time, so I don't know, but it doesn't seem like things would move or things would change. You'd be approaching that realm of the divine absolute for sure. So not even perceiving, but that which makes it all possible. Now the questioner for today, we start off with a beautiful inquiry. What is love?
Swami,
Yes. Do we need to?
you missed muting us.
Okay.
Thank you, Swami.
Sure. All right. Everybody's muted now. But unmute for any reason. If you have anything to say or add or ask or correct. So what is love? You can always find these divine names like beauty or peace or love. Um, these names of God, they seem so easily packaged, like everybody knows what beauty is. But then when you try and actually come up with a rule of what beauty is or a definition for what beauty is, you find that they're infinite. That's how you know that something is a name of God, because they can't be sussed out. Every time you come up with a definition for it, it expands. You realize something more, something bigger, something. And so and these tend to be things that we know the meaning of without ever having to be taught. So he says, what is love? Well, it seems like an easy question. Oh, just be unselfishness, right? But love is infinite. Love is the divine. Love is the one motivating force in the universe, Swamiji says. He says it's the only motivating force in the universe. So Maharaj says, when the sense of distinction and separation is absent, you may call it love. So the sense of distinction and separation. So oneness, really, oneness is love. And that's why Vivekananda defines all virtue to be anything that leads toward that oneness, anything that brings us together. Jesus, when he talked about the oneness of all things, he said the cord that binds everything into oneness is the cord of love. And so love is that oneness, when there is no distinction, no difference, no separation from us, no lack between us. So the questioner says, well, why so much stress on love between man and woman? Maharaj, because the element of happiness in it is so prominent, right? So happiness is different from bliss in that bliss does not need a maintenance. Bliss is not conditional. It's not based on a condition. It's part of our nature. We become aware of it in silence, in stillness of mind. And he's saying that this love between people, between man and woman, romantic love probably is what he's referring to, between two people, that it's so popular and so much fuss for us because the element of happiness is so strong in it. It's where we place our dream. We've got that Disney dream of finding our Prince Charming or our Cinderella, and that person will somehow make us whole and make us happy. And I'm sitting here as I'm saying that, very much that story of the Garden of Eden comes into play. When you place the idea of your fulfillment outside of yourself, like Eve did, um, that's a sign, that's a symptom of egoism, the formation of egoism. And anytime you've got that egoism, you've got that sense of separation, that sense of smallness, that comes in there. And so that happiness, we place it outside of ourselves, we place it in something outside of ourselves, bringing about that perfect love, bringing about that security. What we go looking for in this world, just to kind of frame our problem, is that we come in as infinite immortals. Our nature is Satchitananda, and we're born into this world where we take on a body and we identify with it. And in identifying with the finite, with something small like body and mind, we lose our divine quality, our divine infinity, our divine immortality, our divine sense of fullness and being. And we forfeit that by identifying with body. And we create kind of a working comfort zone called the ego, which just boundaries a wall inside this bigness that we've separated ourselves from. And within that wall, we're in control. And within that wall, we're self-actuated. And so this is where the land of ego is. This is the land of death, actually, within that little boundary that we live there. And so we find ourselves in this world, and we have this irresistible intuition. Like we don't ever consider our death, right? Because really we've never died. We will never die. We've never been born, that we are immortal. So that's why we have this strange sense, especially when we're young, it really comes out, where you just feel immortal, like you're never going to grow old. You'll somehow be the one who exercises and eats right and finds the perfect cream for your face, and you're never going to grow old. Oddly enough, everybody thinks that way. Everybody has an idea in their mind somewhere that they are the one that's going to escape in some weird way. And so what we try and do is we try and recreate our divine nature in this world, right? So we're omnipotent in our nature. So we try to become all powerful here. So we grab finite things that will make us powerful, whether that's running for class president or, getting lots of money. We're infinitely secure as one without a second. We're in a state of unity. So we try to establish that unity here through relationships, through marriage, like that. And so all of our desires in this world are just expressions of our divine nature trying to recreate itself in the finite, which it can't do for obvious reasons. So in doing that, we place things outside of ourselves that will make us whole, because we've become small and finite through our identification with body-mind. And so we seek what is called happiness. And happiness is when we are experiencing a quality of the divine, experiencing security, experiencing pleasure, experiencing wealth, those kinds of things. That's happiness. But it's always conditional, because it takes something from the finite world to make it happen. And so that's why it's temporary and why it's never quite satisfying and will never be enough, because we're looking for an absolute unchanging state of happiness, because that's what our bliss is. That's what our being is. And so we want an unbroken state of happiness, which is what bliss looks like in the world when we're deluded with body-mind. And so the questioner says, well, is it not so in all love? Isn't all love like that? Maharaj, no, not necessarily. Love may cause pain. You call it then compassion. So love that causes pain is compassion, and compassion is also that oneness. Compassion is when you recognize your oneness with someone who is suffering, and so their suffering becomes your own. So the love, your love causes you to hurt. When love is a knowledge of that oneness. And so when you have a knowledge or becoming aware of a oneness with somebody who's suffering, their suffering becomes your suffering. You take it on. So love with pain is compassion. And questioner says, well, what is happiness? Maharaj, happiness is the harmony between the inner and the outer. On the other hand, self-identification with the outer causes us suffering. So happiness is when there's harmony between the inner and outer. Yeah, happiness, harmony between the inner and the outer. The outer is the things that you don't know intimately, you don't know completely. Sri Nisargadatta says that in realization, our final understanding is that there is no inside outside, and there is no interior exterior. There's only isness, that we are not the body minds, and we're not in the body. The soul is not necessarily inside the body, that the body and this whole creation is inside the self, very much like the dream world is inside the dreamer, right? And so anytime that we eliminate that sense of inner outer, when we get a harmony going, which is really the best we can do when we're body identified, is just get a nice harmony going between the inner and the outer world. That's happiness. That's worldly contentment, right? But it's short-lived. There'll always be something that gets interjected that causes that harmony to break, that puts in some discord. Swami Prabhupada and I had several interesting conversations about things like that. He says that Maya at its finest level has a what do you call that? An uncertainty, the uncertainty principle, I guess what physics would call that. But Maharaj said that in Maya, at the very fundamentals built into Maya is an uncertainty principle, so that you can never get control of all the variables in order to be in charge of Maya. So like some dictator, no matter how much surveillance he sets up, no matter how many police he hires, it is always set up so that no one can maintain a monopoly on any of their desires, right? And so everything will come undone, no matter how carefully it's constructed, no matter how carefully it's executed. Everything will come undone. There's no way to create your home in this world. And so he says, harmony between the inner and the outer is happiness. On the other hand, self-identification with the outer causes suffering, right? And the outer means our body mind. When we identify with those things, and actually when we identify with anything outside the self, because that's really what desire is. Desire is identifying with something and wanting to bring it into yourself, make it a part of yourself. And so when you have that desire, by necessity, you suffer, because desire is always based on a sense of lack, on something being missing. And if you don't have anything missing, you have nothing to desire. And so this is a great lesson for us, because that's the first step into wrong thinking, is to think that something is imperfect about this moment, and that something in the moment needs to be changed in order to become perfect. That is the delusion. And so when you feel that sense, that's a great time to go inward and say, oh, there's an attachment here. Attachment always gives the sense of lack, always gives the sense of need. And so you're like, uh-oh, and you go in and you search yourself out. Where's the attachment? What is it that I'm not seeing? And then go back and do what Adam and Eve should have done when they felt that sense of lack. When they looked at that fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, the ego fruit on that tree, when they looked at it and found it beautiful, that's fine. We should find everything beautiful, but we should remember that it's beautiful because God is in it. God is behind it, or that divine ultimate reality is being reflected in it. And so that's where the attraction comes from. So we should always keep that in mind, that this moment God is everywhere present and always perfect. So the divine nature of this world, the divine, the what do you want to, whatever you want to call it, that's comfortable for you. Uh, you know, yeah, because jnana, or the path of knowledge, or Advaita, does not get rid of God, and so it gets rid of you. So our idea that Advaita, a lot of times Westerners like Advaita because it gets rid of that pesky God problem, but really it gets rid of the pesky you problem. God remains intact. God is the one reality, that unchanging absolute. So God is more, according to Vivekananda, at that level, God is the divine principle. God is a principle. He's the pure potential of the highest ideal, which would be unconditioned love, unbroken bliss, infinite wisdom, all through being. So identifying with anything outside of ourself causes us suffering, because it requires a sense of lack for that to happen, a sense of need and a grabbing, but you're grabbing the unreal to feel, to prop something up, and so that's not going to sustain you. That's not going to make you happy. So how does this self-identification happen, Maharaj? The self, by its nature, knows itself only. For lack of experience, whatever it perceives, it takes to be itself. Battered, it learns to look out and to live alone. When right behavior becomes normal, a powerful inner urge makes it seek its source. The candle of the body is lighted, and all becomes clear and bright. Okay, so he's walking us through here. How does self-identification happen? So the self, by its nature, knows itself only, right? So it knows itself as that singularity. It's kind of a constantly churning self-knowledge, as it were, just within its perfectly contained, perfected self. Knows itself only. It is identity, just raw identity, right? So knowing itself only is just being raw identity. For lack of experience, whatever it perceives. So when it goes into a state of individuality, or a state of separation, or a takes one step down from the one without a second, has an awareness of a self, right? But no knowledge of itself as the whole. So for lack of experience, whatever it perceives, it takes to be itself, right? So it sees the body, it sees the mind, and it takes it to be itself. And once it takes that body mind, that mind generates an entire universe from that puddle of, or that disturbance of me and mine that arises from being separate and apart from the whole. So that comes out after it experiences that separation, experiences that identity with the finite. It gets so beaten up by it. It gets battered. And it learns to look out. It learns to be aware. It learns viveka, right? So it learns this awareness. And to live alone, vairagya. So it realizes it's that process, Ramakrishna says, of knowing the changing to be unreal, right? So it's a constant process of looking for what is not changing in this world, and building your life on that which is not changing. Everything that changes is unreal, right? Everything that changes is in a constant state of flux. It is what it is, only for a moment, and then it goes back into another form or takes a different state. And so vairagya is really the process of looking for that which is unchanging and discarding everything else, saying, nope, that's not real. Nope, that's not real. And of course, that one unchanging thing is what? It's the thing in you that's looking for the unchanging. It's that you that's looking, right? It's the experiencer, the self in there, that you that's looking through your eyes right now, that you that's borrowing your ears right now. That is the only thing that's unchanging. It's been the same since you were 2, 5, 13, 25, 55, 75. and ashes in an urn. Well, like probably ashes in the urn is quite a separation at that point. There's probably no more identity going on at that point. But so um, this nature, this self, learns through its experience of identity with the temporary that suffering is there, that it needs to be renounced. It needs to extract itself from the delusion, from the ignorant, from that which is unreal. And then when right behavior becomes normal, right behavior is that knowledge of the self. That means that all of your behaviors are emanating from the inspiration of your nature, from the inspiration of Satchit Ananda. So everything that you do is being inspired by an unconditioned love. Everything that you're doing is being informed by a spontaneous, infinite wisdom in the moment. And renunciation and independence, freedom is the outcome of that. When right behavior becomes normal, a powerful inner urge, mumukshutva, makes it seek its source, right? Where is this Satchit Ananda that is inspiring? Where is this coming from? What is this nature? What is this divine love? The candle of the body is lighted. We become aware of what is from the very beginning, the Rig Veda, the body is a temple. And we become aware of the deity. We become aware of the self that dwells there. And then through our inner practice, we find the shrine, right? We find that inner space of the absolute unchanging. And we go there and we worship. And when we find that shrine and we begin the worship of that self, within our own shrine, within the heart, the candle of the body is lit, right? The body has served its purpose, and that divine light simply shines. And in the absence of ego, Satchitananda distributes itself in equanimity. It's not measured, it's not metered. The love that comes out of you is equanimous in all directions. It doesn't have a nozzle on it like a hose. That's egoism. Egoism puts a nozzle on Satchitananda and makes you only give your love to people you find deserving of it, or people that will benefit you, when your search for trying to build yourself in the finite. And so in the end, though, when this light is lit, this awareness of what we are, the knowledge that the body is the temple of this self, and that the worship of this self is the emanation of its nature through love, wisdom, and being, and that we walk that way in this world, that is worship. To walk in the presence of our true nature is worship. And so we live in a constant state of unending, always changing worship. Meaning we take this moment, all that it brings, we put it through the inspiration of Satchitananda. What comes out, we offer back to the beloved as an offering, a closed circle of worship. So everything is done in the moment for its own sake, as an expression or an inspiration of a knowledge of self, a knowledge of divine love, a knowledge of divine wisdom. And it takes us out of the past, lets us discard the past, because the past is only a bag that we throw our attachments into. So at this point, we realize we have no need of attachments, because there is a perfection inherent within us that we found in the shrine of the heart. And so we discard our attachments, we discard our sense of past. That discarding of our attachments allows us to experience the moment purely, with no lens of desire on it, no lens of wrong thinking. And that we find there our spontaneous bliss. And because we have no desire being caused by our attachments, we no longer need a future. We no longer have to plan out how to manifest our attachments into the moment. And so the sense of future disappears. Both of those concepts are no longer necessary. They were actually what would you call it? They were actually symptoms of an infected mind. Past and present are symptoms of a mind that is sick with the ideas of me and mine. Right? So we place those ideas of me and mine, which are foreign to our nature because we are not limited. We're one without a second. So me and mine is an unnatural idea that gets embedded in the mind like a virus or like a like a bacteria, and that bacteria explodes. Me and mine becomes everything. Lust and greed literally ends in a universe.
I can't think of who said it, but he talked about the living perpetually in an uncalculating mind.
Yes.
Meaning that, your mind isn't calculating, based on an imagined past and calculating an imaginary future, that it's just in the present with no type of motive or calculation going on. And,
Yes.
I've been kind of meditating on that, trying to stop that calculation all the time. And, and I started paying attention to how, one of the, there's a recording of a devotee talking about her firsthand experience of Swamiji and how unassuming he was.
Uh-huh.
And, I started thinking about how many things that we think are based on assumptions that we don't know that are true. And if you just start eliminating all the thoughts that are based on assumptions that are not true, it's like, in a way, you kind of eliminate everything. And
yeah, that's true. Although be careful, that's a red herring. If I know what a red herring is, in that it's like it's jumping into the swimming pool to calm the waves.
Yeah.
Because when you're in your mind trying to eliminate, who's trying to eliminate what? So you have brought into that scenario the disease. You've brought a me and mine. You've brought a separate self into mind, and then trying to, stop the thinking. It's good to do what you're doing as an exercise to come to a knowing. But ultimately, the only way the mind stops is when the attention is focused on the self itself, on the awareness of awareness. That will quiet the mind. What quiets the mind is a lack of interest in the mind. And we become uninterested in the mind when we are being fed or inspired by our knowledge of the self, by our experience.
But like when he's talking about the seeing the true self, see it being the unchanging. But to me, when I'm looking at it for say, it seems like it's only unchanging as long as there's no desire. And then as soon as there's a desire, then you can't see the true self anymore. The observation is still there, but now it's warped by the kind of like, I kind of think of the object in the mind like a physical object having a gravity to it, warping the perception,
Yeah, no, that's for the person who's looking in the mind. You see, we're looking under the mind. Our answer doesn't lie in the mind. Our answer lies in what becomes apparent when the mind is silent. And so we're going before mind. So we're really just trying to become aware of that source of love that's in us. That's why we use the mantra. The mantra is kind of like that chain that slowly leads us to the source. As we get better at saying the mantra, repeating the mantra, that divine principle is invoked ever more clearly for us with more clarity. And we go looking for that source. Where does that love come from? Where does that bliss come from? Where is this wisdom coming from? This fun, not the wisdom of mind, not knowledge, not secular knowledge, relative knowledge that has to be queried, but an inherent knowledge that's actually in the moment itself.
Which I agree. But then as soon as the mind says I or me, then it's all gone.
Well, the mind won't say anything. It's you attaching to mind that caused the wave of me to happen. Yeah. So we kind of just want to let the mind do what it's going to do. We don't controlling, yes, but we control it by putting our attention on the self. We can't actually control our thoughts. They come, that's the wheel of samsara that's just rolling down the hill. Our attention with it is what makes us roll down the hill with it, our identity with it. But in fact, it's possible just to let it roll down the hill and you just not even go along. And
that's the problem. How do we not let the the observer become the doer? How do we let that just pass through the mind without clinging to it?
We're going to cling. Well, anytime you cling, you're going to hurt. So that's going to teach you in time. It's not your nature to be bound. So that's going to teach us in time. But it's let the mind do what, be relatively unconcerned. In Jnana Yoga, that's the instruction Vivekananda gives, watch your mind, let it do what it's doing. Let it be loud, let it be noisy, let it jump all over the place. But you stay aware of yourself being the observer of it. And that, just holding on to that, not letting yourself engage in the contents of the mind, but simply engaging in the observance of the contents of the mind, not letting yourself forget that you're observing the mind, that you are not the mind, that you're observing it. As you do that, the rest will slowly, in time, become apparent to you. The mind will begin to calm down. And as soon as that begins to happen and you've managed to stay aware of awareness, you've managed to not get tricked into identifying with it, to thinking that the thoughts were yours or that they were about you. If you can manage to do that, then the volume of the presence gets amped. That love, that bliss that you experience gets louder, ultimately becomes louder than the external world for you, ultimately more apparent to you than the sense world. That's when we're getting established in that space. And when that begins to happen, the silence of the mind is a natural cohort of that, right? And at that point, when you actually you become much more aware of when you attach to mind, because you feel the contraction that happens when you identify with a particular. You feel that, when you get a good meditation, when we start getting several good meditations and we're starting to enjoy the spillover of that bliss, we start becoming much more acutely aware of the things that block it. We start seeing our attachments. We see them long before they become objects or they become full desires. We feel that first little spark of a samskara arising from the flame of the self, as it were. And you identify with it, and immediately you feel the tenseness that comes with that. You feel the contraction of identifying with particulars, and at that point, it's much more easy to let go, because it hasn't formed a full thought. It hasn't formed a state of mind, and so you can let go more easily at that point. But in the practice of this, it's withdrawing ourselves from body mind in order to understand that we are observing them, and sit in that observance, right? Doing our discernment, keeping our mind, keeping our observations on what is changing and what is not changing, what is body, what is mind, and what's the self that's being inferred, because I can't see the self. I can see the mind, I can see the body, but the self I can't see, because that's me. So we have to intuit it. We have to open to it. Very much like we come to know our face, as it were. We learn about our face through reflection. And so through this reflection, through this world, we learn about the self, right? The universe is just the reflection of the self on mind. So we come to learn it that way. All right. So our nature is identity. When we come within a close proximity of body mind, we take on that identity. We identify with body mind and all of its finite nature. That then we feel an inspiration or a need or a drive or a compulsion at that point to create our infinite self in the finite, right, through egoism. We find suffering from that. We find a continual stream of suffering from that. So we begin to back out by experience. We begin to learn. We begin to see that there is untruth there. There is delusion in those attachments. And once we start pulling back into the state of awareness and the renunciation that it brings through the things that we're learning, through the discernment, the discernment sparks a renunciation of that which is unreal, that which is changing, that which is not us. And when that becomes established, the self becomes aware of its own self, of its own nature. That becomes its impetus or its motivation for manifestation, just an inspiration of its own self, no longer a chasing after a desire or something it imagines it needs or is missing. That's egoistic life, where we are driven by a grabbing, a trying to get. But in realization, that motivation turns to an inspiration. We do from the inside out, no longer grabbing, reaching for something outside to bring it in. We act and be from inside out. So it's our nature, the divine love that we feel. It's not a feeling, but it manifests in a feeling in the body. When we're established in that inner shrine, in that inner stillness, aware of the real and the unreal, have managed to control our attachments to where we become the observer, then we're the winds of grace, as it were, that inspiration of that immense and unlimited bliss that you have, you become aware of, and that becomes what makes you act. You feel love for everything that you see. You're recognizing this divinity, this ultimate reality in everything. You're knowing that the nature of everything that you are experiencing through the senses, that the ultimate nature of that is Satchitananda also. And so love is interacting with love always. And in that state of enlightenment, no wrong can be done, because you're not motivated by an egoistic sense of lack. You're motivated by the inspiration of your divine nature, which is Satchitananda. And so at that point, your mind and the mind of God, as it were, are the same. You've come to know that thou art that, right? That you wrote the scriptures and you put them in the story and jumped in with them, knowing that they would rescue you from your own game. So what is the real cause of suffering, Maharaj? Self-identification with the limited, right? Forgetting your divine nature and believing yourself to be this manifested creature, one amongst many. Sensations as such, however strong, do not cause suffering, right? So the sensations are there and will always be there. They don't cause you suffering until you identify with them, right? If your son dies, you suffer terribly. If the neighbor's son dies, you acknowledge the pain of your neighbor and you go on with your day, right? Because you're not identified with your neighbor's son. So that does not cause you suffering. Now you can get different levels of that. If you're very close with your neighbor, you can have some attachment to your neighbor's son, and to that degree you'll suffer for that death. But so it's not the sensations, it's not the senses, it's not even the experiences that make us suffer, right? We look at Ramakrishna, he was dying of throat cancer. He could stop it at will. And we saw that in a couple of instances. So throat cancer doesn't make you suffer. Your identity with that cancer being your cancer in your body causes suffering. But when you know yourself not to be body, not to be any body, and know yourself not to be mind, any mind, then you do not have to suffer. You can observe and see that. So self-identification with the limited. Sensations as such, however strong, do not cause suffering. It is the mind, bewildered by wrong ideas Addicted to thinking, I am this, I am that, that fears loss and craves gain and suffers when frustrated. See, those are the symptoms of identity with the material or with the limited. We become addicted to thinking, describing ourselves, right? From we can't take enough selfies. we can't put enough pictures of our food up on Instagram. These are signs of addiction to thinking, addiction to trying to fulfill that which can't be fulfilled by desire or through desire. So it's your self-identification with the limited that causes you to suffer. It's not the sensations, and it's not the events of your life, and it's not the things happening in life. They are not what are causing you to suffer. It's your identity with them that makes you suffer with them. The mind bewildered by wrong ideas, and these wrong ideas are me and mine, right? The wrong idea of me and mine, which is the wrong idea of being small, being a particular, being separate and apart from the whole. That is the chronic fundamental disease. To think that you are separate from the whole is what opens you up to pain, right? So you think you're separate from the whole. If you're separate from the whole, who are you? And that is what you try and answer. And in that state, it can't be answered, because you can't answer the state, who am I, when you're taking yourself as being separate from the whole. You can only answer that question when you know that you are the whole, when you are the complete, right? So the mind, bewildered by these wrong ideas of me and mine, of smallness and separateness, becomes addicted to thinking, I am this, I am that, coming up. We think that we are our thoughts. We think that we are our personality. We think we are our behaviors. We think we are the body. And so we're constantly putting jewels on that, decorating that. Oh, I'm this. Oh, I'm that. And it changes constantly. We're not always trying to be the same thing. You know, in junior high, you had one sense of self that you were trying to manifest, and that changed when you went through puberty. And high school, you became slightly different, and then college, even different from that, and now even different from that. And so this constant noise of the mind are the symptoms of our disease. And the degree of your sickness you can measure by how calm you can make the mind, how calm the mind can become. If you're addicted to thinking all the time, you can't get that thing to be quiet. Yes, that's a lot of trouble. But you still exist as you are in the moment. It's not a matter of saying, oh, I've got a long ways to go. You always are what you are. So it's not something you have to accomplish. It's just something you have to take your attention and apply it to. Addicted to thinking, I am this, I am that. That fears loss, right? Because in this world, you can lose whatever you gain. So fear is always there. It craves gain. I need more. Why? Because none of this is ever fulfilling, right? I read an article about coffee. You drink a cup of coffee. After 2 weeks, your body has adjusted so that you need that coffee to reach the normal levels of serotonin in the mind that you had before you started drinking coffee. So to get that bump, you now have to have 2 coffees, right? That's the nature of Maya. Every desire requires more. That's the nature of Maya. Every desire requires more. And every fulfilled desire simply intensifies that desire. You just want more of it, right? You will never have enough sex. You will never have enough good food. You will never have enough pleasure. You'll never be young enough. You'll never be beautiful enough. You'll never be rich enough. And even if you manage to get to be super, 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 super rich, learn from those who are super, super, super rich. What are they doing? They're still out there trying to get richer. So understand, there is never enough. There will never be enough in this finite world. Why? Because you are an infinite immortal. You are not looking for a temporary fix. You are looking for yourself, that immortal infinite. So this, I am that, it fears loss, craves gain, And it suffered when it's frustrated. It suffers when it's frustrated. Frustrated, what does frustrated mean? The suffering comes from desires not being fulfilled. Right? When you work so hard to attain something, you get it, and it's not what you were looking for. It's that joke about vacation. You know, vacation is as soon as you start that vacation, what are you doing? The countdown, right? You've got 2 weeks in paradise. You go sit on that first day. Oh my God, now I've just got 13 days left. Oh, 12. Oh my gosh, just 10 more days. Oh my gosh, just 3 more days of vacation. And then the vacation's over. And then you go what? Then you go back to imagining the next one. So it's an unbroken cycle of suffering. While you're not on vacation, you're longing for it. So you're suffering because you don't have vacation now. And then when you're on vacation, you're suffering because it's disappearing from underneath you one day at a time. And you're going to return to that state of wanting vacation again. And this is Maya. If you are a discerning person, you will see that early on and you will escape. You will not suffer that. But if you're a person of delusion, you'll just think you haven't had the right drink yet. You haven't chosen the right partner yet. You know, I always felt sorry for Elizabeth Taylor. Just one husband after another. You'd think after 3, 4, or 5, or 6 of them, you get the idea. Happiness isn't going to be in a husband, right? You'd think you'd get that idea, but we don't. We go through 6, 7, 8, 9, and sometimes 10. You know, and even then, it's just the length of life that keeps us from going on to 11, 12, and 13. So learn this lesson. Learn this. This is the gateway to your freedom, to your happiness, to your bliss, to knowing your nature. The questioner says, a friend of mine used to have horrible dreams night after night. Going to sleep would terrorize him. Nothing could help him. Maharaj, company of the truly good would help him. Right? And why would he say that? Because we all live in a universal mind, right? We live in a universal mind of which we use a part that we call mind in there. But our desires are affected by the people that we're around. Their realities bleed in from their segment of the universal mind into our segment of the universal mind. So if you're around, that's why holy company is so important, because those thoughts bleed in, those thoughts affect us, those thoughts spark attachments and activate our own samskaras, right, and bring them up. So if you've got an old friend that you used to hang around and do an old vice together and you see them 50 years later, chances are at least the thoughts of that old vice are going to come up as soon as you see them. That's the nature of it. So company of truly good people is helpful. So for this person, he's saying, for someone who had horrible nightmares, you know, changing their company, changing the people they hang around with will be very helpful to that. When you're one of the signs you're around a holy person, Swami Prabhutananda told me. So you know that you're in the presence of an accomplished spiritual seeker when you naturally think of the divine in their presence, when you feel a natural calmness in their presence, a natural sweetness around them, then you know. Questioner, well, life itself is a nightmare. Oh my goodness. Maharaj, noble friendship is the supreme remedy for all of these ills, physical and mental. Noble friendship, good company, holy company. Ramakrishna also says at different points, he even says it's the most important thing. It's the fastest way of getting to your realization is maintaining holy company, right? Staying around people who know what they are, who know who they are. And so you don't spend all of your time in vain quests and adventures together, looking for things that are unreal. Well, generally one cannot find such friendship, Maharaj. Seek within. Your own self is your own best friend. Beautiful. You see how holy company ultimately becomes, you are your own holy company, right? That's where that ends. Seek within. Your own self is your best friend. This, oh, there is so much beauty in that. There's so much rest in that, because this is what removes attachment. The reason we don't go searching outside for things is because we finally come to this knowledge that that most beautiful thing that we've been seeking is that which is behind our face, that which is before our mind, right? That which is outside of ego. It takes us a while to touch that, but therein is the greatest beauty, is to come to that knowledge. All the love that you seek is that self within. All the friendship you seek is that self within. All the things that you're hoping to get by your collection of all the flashy things of the senses, all of those are contained within. And it's only because we find them that we become self-satisfied, santosha, supremely satisfied. Seek within. Your own self is your best friend. Why is life so full of contradictions? Maharaj, it serves to break down mental pride, right? The egoism is the cause of it, and egoism is being disturbed by it. Ego is being attacked by the healthy the healthy self, right? Egoism is always under attack. That's why it's always maintaining itself. It's always trying to grab and get more of what it needs to manifest it, what it thinks is its nature. So it's always under attack because Maya is all about breaking down mental pride. Maya is really trying to get you to your realization. That's why this world is never enough, right? Nothing is satisfying here for more than a short while. That's built into the system. That's grace. That's love. So that you can't get lost here. You can't get established here. Nobody's going to be lost in this world of change forever. No one. Everybody comes home because your nature will not rest until it has solved this problem, until it has found its source of peace, its source of love, its source of being. So why is life so full of contradictions? It serves to break down mental pride. We must realize how poor and powerless we are. As long as we delude ourselves by what we imagine ourselves to be, to know, to have, to do, we are in a sad plight indeed. Only in complete self-negation there is a chance to discover our real being, right? So we have to give up this idea of being small, of being in need, of lacking things, of being subject to conditions and change. We have to break this attachment, this wrong thinking, this wrong idea of who we are. Because until we do, we can't be free. We're going to suffer. We're going to be stuck in this delusion. And so this complete self-negation is what allows you to be everything, right? Because you have to stop holding on to little particulars in order to be everything. And so you don't have to become who you are. You have to be who you are. And to be who you are, you have to stop thinking that you're anything else, right? You stop, if anything is telling you what you are, you're in delusion. You only know what you are in the silence of mind. When everything is silent and nothing is telling you who you are, only then do you become aware of who you are. Otherwise, your attachments will hold on to thought, and you'll try and define yourself through thought and through the mind, and consequently through the body. And you won't be able to get there from there. All right. Let's stop there for the morning.